I'm PJ Smith. I run a guide service up here in the Driftless, as most of you know. My wife, Donna, is right now acting manager at the Orvis store in Madison. So we're really heavy into fly fishing. As most of you might know, we just sold our house in Illinois, and pretty soon Donna will be closing her store and will actually be living in the same house again, which will be nice. So not good that she's losing her job, but we're making do, and hopefully something will come around, which will be great. And then my brother from Eau Claire, or not Eau Claire, from Hudson, sorry, is joining us too. I saw him up there. So his name's Brian Elwood. So that's my brother. Many of you have seen him in some of my pictures and that. We've kind of turned him into an avid fly fisherman. And then we are also teaching the kids, his 3 kids, how to fly fish. And one of them has actually been kind of fly tying as well. So Evie is, she's quite the tire. So we will continue on. I just to kind of start off with, here the night fishing around here can be phenomenal. It is definitely a fantastic time to get out. It's not for everybody though. It can be dangerous. I tell people be very aware of your surroundings when you're up here and you want to night fish. I try to also tell people if you are going to night fish, go to a spot that you've already fished, go to a spot that you feel comfortable in, one that is not filled with logs, places that you can get stuck. Some of the fields actually have cattle and other livestock in them. And if you're not used to those animals, I would suggest finding other places. The nice thing about having cattle in some of them, though, is they keep it pretty mowed down. So it can be advantageous if you get into a field that has all the grass mowed down around the sides so that you can actually cast fairly well. So kind of my setup, I'm going to reach over, grab a few things just to kind of go over some stuff. First and foremost, obviously fishing at night, you need a few things. I use a headlamp. I don't know if you guys can see it there, but this is just a Petzl headlamp. It has 2 different settings. It has a red and it has a white light on it. So that I don't, kind of hard to see in this, but so it has a red light. I like a headlamp just because it's easy to just put on and then you can use it as needed. You usually only need it when you catch a fish. You don't want to be shining your light into the water as you're fishing. I have a couple different ones. This one's actually a Coleman. It works really good. It actually has several different settings as well. Relatively inexpensive, probably in the, well, probably between the like $15 to $40 range is all you'd really need. I do like the red light though, just for the simple fact that you can continue to use them and it doesn't mess up your night vision in that. On that same realm, I also, just as a backup, because flashlights and all that, anything with a battery can sometimes fail. So I do carry a separate light. This little one here is kind of nice. It actually fits on the bill of your hat with a clip. And that's just a regular white light. It's got the real powerful LED, can be focused. So I carry that as a separate spare just in case I get into a situation I need to have 2 lights, one handheld, my headlamp goes bad, etc. So I always try to err on this side of caution. The other thing that I usually carry is either my long-handled net or I carry a walking staff. It makes it really nice because then you can kind of probe to make sure you're not walking into a deep hole, which could suck you in. Um, the advantage of just carrying a long-handled net is that you only just have to carry one thing instead of two. Usually those longer handled nets also are great because then sometimes the fish that you catch at night are a little bit bigger. So that's always a good thing. So other things of caution for some of this is just making sure that you debarb all your hooks. You want to make sure that you're debarbing everything before you start casting and put it into your arm. I also carry a pretty stout pair of pliers just in case something happens. I also carry a knife, again, in case something happens. A lot of this area around here is not too bad. Most of the water is maybe thigh deep at most. But there are some places that can get really deep. And if you get caught up, hopefully you can reach and cut stuff off if need be. So you just want to be aware of your surroundings. I always say err on the side of caution, so that you can get out. Again, some guys are super hardcore and they'll go, super hard into areas they've never been. Again, it's not for everybody. I have fished throughout this region, so I know a lot of this water, and some water is better than others. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of my setup. I usually switch to a larger rod as well. Um, I'd probably say my normal setup is like a 5 weight. I did start using a 6 weight a few years ago, just to cast larger flies. I have used my 3 weight, the H3 uh, 3 weight actually works really well. I just tie a slightly shorter, heavier leader on there, and it can actually turn over these bigger bugs and stuff. So you can use what you have. 4 weight obviously would work pretty double duty, but a 5 weight is kind of handy just if you're casting larger, bigger bugs in that too. So, um, and again, like if you guys have any questions, don't feel you can chime in anytime to let me know. So, um, so the fly tonight we're going to tie is called the Master Splinter, and it is a fly that was designed by Joe Carmelli, who used to be on. I think he was with Flying or not Flying Field. He was with Field and Stream. He was one of their um, people that started a couple different programs with them, and he also had a another program called Hook Shots, and they kind of did all kinds of fishing. Right now, he is with Meat Eater and does a program called Bend. I haven't seen it, but he seemed to be pretty. He's kind of an all-around fisherman. He fishes. He's from out east, so he fishes all kind of water, all kind of things. But he does a lot of fly fishing when he can. So he tied up this Master Splinter. Really easy tie, kind of fun. I will show you a few here that I tied up real quick. This one here is one of my early ones, tied a little bit different than what he did. This one was used last year, and I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but that one's actually kind of chewed up, a little bit different head there. And then this is pretty much how he ties it. So this is it, a little bit of foam tied on a big old Gamakatsu B10S. This is a 2-aught, so pretty stout hook. So that's kind of it. So we'll go ahead and try to hopefully get my camera up and running. I can see my camera, but I need to see if it will go to does anybody know how to get my camera to show up on?
Go to your video button and click on the video button, and it should give you an option, and it should say microscope camera. Click your video button in the toolbar on the bottom.
All right, let me all right. I have a thing that says stop video, but that's probably not it, is it? Oh,
No.
here it is.
Click on the arrow.
Click on the arrow next to it.
Yeah, got it. Let's see if it'll go on here. Did it go on there?
No, you turned off your video.
Okay, hold
Yeah.
on.
You got to click the one that says microscope camera.
Hold on. All right, hold on.
PJ,
Yeah,
first
Yeah, go
click
ahead.
on the camera down there and it'll
Okay.
push it back up.
all right,
Now go
there's
down
that.
to that little up arrow.
Yep,
Click on the up arrow
got it.
and you should have two choices.
Yep, got it.
Okay.
Nope. It
Huh.
keeps turning
I
off.
see that.
Yeah.
Now, do you get two choices on the up arrow?
Yes. Yeah, I have my
Should say integrated camera, and the other one should be microscope camera.
yep. Yeah, I can see them both. As soon as I turn on to the digital microscope though, from somehow it
It's plugged in.
yeah,
Is
it's plugged in. It's actually running on right now. So
Hey, PJ, try unplugging it and plugging it back in. That sounds
Okay.
stupid, but
no, that's not stupid.
We normally do this ahead of time. We should have done this earlier.
Yeah.
used to work for Dell. So
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. We can edit this out.
Right.
All right, here we go. Let's do this. We'll plug it in again. All right. There we go. There, that's what it
Grateful,
took.
PJ.
Their technology, pretty awesome.
The PJ, before you even get started, is that big Gamakatsu a little overkill for the driftless area or not?
No.
That's interesting to hear.
I have been using 1/0 and 2/0 here in the driftless quite a bit. Actually, some of my streamers that I tie have been on big Gamakatsus and that. So you'd be amazed. These fish will suck that down, no problem. It does kind of weed out some of the smaller fish. You may get a tug here or there, but I mean, I've had big browns take these 2/0. So yeah, they definitely, they'll eat it. If they want to eat it, they'll eat it. These fish are not shy, especially during those times, and dark and stuff. So
PJ, could you push your camera back just a teeny bit? You're really close.
yeah, let me,
Just push the camera back.
Yep.
Pull your,
yeah, I'm just trying to keep everything.
right.
There we go. How's that? A little better?
That's getting better. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Here, I'll,
And then pull your shirt straight. The wrinkles are.
Yep. Sorry.
Perfect. You're good.
So just so you guys know, this is backwards, but this is a B10S by Gamakatsu. So you can usually find them in most fly shops. Don't be afraid to try something else. Mustad. These mustads right here are almost identical hooks. So if you can't get a hold of the Gamakatsu, I do feel the Gamakatsu is probably a much better hook, but these are the Mustad signatures. Great little hook as well, if that's what you've got. some old style mustads. These are kind of a stinger hook. They will work as well. So that's 3366. You know, and there's all kinds of stuff. There's Rex hooks, etc. Whatever you're comfortable with, you can try this with other hooks. You know, just however, again, this is a super stout hook. This hook, if you happen to put it, and I'm telling you this via experience, you will not be able to cut this off without like a small bolt cutter. I put one in my arm, and I had a pair of side cutters, and it wouldn't go through it. So just be aware of that. Mash those barbs down.
Yep.
These are super hard. But if you do put one into yourself, it's not something you're just gonna like, you know, use your little pliers and all that. So just so you're aware. So I go ahead and chuck it in there. I'll go through some of the other stuff as well while we're right
PJ?
here. Yes, go
PJ,
ahead.
When you hold up stuff with writing on it, it looks backward to you, but it comes up right to us out here.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
So
good to
that's
know
what-
because I'm looking at it on my screen and I'm like, wow, why is that so backwards? But everything seems to be looking right. So we'll just go from there. So I use 2mm foam. You can get this at fly shops and other places. It comes in sheets. I just cut them down to about a 1/2 inch wide, give or take. That's for a 2/0. If you are using anything smaller, you would just pare down just a little bit. I use regular rabbit strips. If you are going really, I wouldn't go too small, maybe to like a size 1 or 2. If you do that, you can get away with pine squirrel strips. They actually work pretty well for that. But most of my stuff, I use just regular rabbit strips. You can use all different colors, but I will say the darker colors are usually my preferred. I do use a few that are kind of this like lighter tan that's got some barring on it there too, which actually looks kind of cool. I have thought about tying an all white one, but you know, and I mean, I've even used chartreuse for the tail. And when it's dark, it really doesn't matter. So you're really pushing water so that they can key in on where this is. And last thing for the tail section, I take small rabbit strips. I cut them to about the length of the shank. And then I trim off some, I leave a small tuft at the end of the tail. And then that's all just kind of shaved. I just trim it with scissors. If you don't like, some people will actually cut off. This is actually a chunk of like pine squirrel that I had to shave to get some dubby material. I just saved the leather for that stuff. Makes great little tails. You can do that. I've even seen guys use the chenille and all that. Just make sure you glue the tip so that you don't, it doesn't start unraveling. So a lot of options there. You know, you can do what you want to do. Ultra suede works pretty good as well if you want to cut thin strips of ultra suede. So, so there's that. So, and I am using 210 denier, so it's kind of heavy. And as most people know, I tend to use fluorescent orange as my color. You can use black, white, doesn't really matter. It's just thread. So I just get it tied on there. And I just go ahead. I'm going to go all the way back basically to the point of the hook. And what I'm going to do is take one of my small rabbit, and I pre-do these. I try to, if I'm tying in production, I try to get these all set up ahead of time. So, and then what I do is I actually pinch this on the side. I don't know if you guys can see it there. So I do a lot of thread torque on my fly. So I actually pinch it onto my side, and then the thread torque, as I start putting 3 or 4 wraps on here, will actually cause it to move up to the top. So thread torque is really what you can wrap 100 times loose, or you can wrap 3 times tight, and the 3 tight wraps are going to last longer than those 100 loose wraps. So, so that's about 3 wraps on there. I usually try to go maybe a few more. I usually like to end up right there between the point and the barb of the hook. Can you guys all see that? So that's pretty much the start of that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually cut my foam, and I'm using slightly longer scissors, and I'm going to cut a wedge . So I cut a wedge. I'm leaving that strip, the whole strip, but I cut a long wedge. And what that allows me to do, and same technique, I'm going to put it on the side. It's just going to ease the bulk down just a little bit on.
PJ, how long is that strip?
This strip is probably, it's like 6 inches, give or take. I usually just take my my foam. When the foam comes in the package, this is usually, I don't know if you guys can see it there, but it's a sheet of foam probably about 6 inches wide by maybe 8 inches. And then I just take it on the short side and just cut it off. I use a razor blade, and I'll just cut strips. And I use a straight edge with that razor blade just so that it stays straight. It's not critical for that, but it just makes, for me, it makes my tying easier. I try to pre-prep a lot of my materials. This is how you can tie a little bit faster. This is a production style. So you pre-do a lot of steps so that you can actually tie faster. So back in the day when I was tying more some commercial stuff, I would try to pre-do as much as I could. So you pre-prep this. I guess if I really wanted to, I could cut all these wedges, but I actually like to kind of do it as is. I am going to start this foam, and I am pinching it right onto the side on my side, and then I'm going to use thread torque to actually roll it up onto the top. And just with those 2 turns on there, it rolled it right up to the top. And then I'm going to do a couple of loose wraps up to the front, and then bring it right on back, right to that tie-in point. Next thing you want to do is grab your rabbit strip. And then I usually, and just so you know, like,
Hey,
especially-
PJ, can I put in 2 cents right now? Just a quick
Yep.
question.
you sure can.
On the original that I saw, and I guess it was that Cavelli guy that tied it.
Yep.
What he does is he ties his foam in just about where you started your thread. And for some reason, he feels that enhances buoyancy. I mean, how do you feel about that? Too much bulk for you?
You know, I could put a lot more foam. I mean, some of my originals, I didn't even fold the head over. I just kind of made it almost like a gurgler. I really think the foam, just this 2 millimeter foam, is probably enough. I actually kind of like these when they get a little sopping wet. They'll sink in a little bit. If you look at mice that get dropped into the water, they're not floating like a cork. You know, they're a body that's been dropped into the water, so they're not going to float like a cork up on top. They're going to actually have their body in the water. So I could put on more flotation. Again, you want to try to just don't be afraid to change it up. Like if you wanted to tie in a full length of foam on the bottom here and then wrap your material on there, try it that way. You may find like this pattern would be great for smallmouth and stuff like that on like a early morning, late into the evening type fishing. So and then even like largemouth bass will smash these. So don't be afraid to try different things. This is just the way I've found tying these that works best for here in the Driftless. You know, it's super easy for me to just whip these together. I mean, I usually sit down and tie like a dozen or more of these, and I'm pretty good for at least, you know, a few outings. Because I do lose a bunch. You are casting in the dark, you hook into trees, you've got to snap off. Most of the time, if it was light enough, I could see where I was hooked up, I'd go in it after it. But a lot of times you're fishing in heavier brushed areas and it can be dangerous trying to go after these flies. So, and yeah, don't be afraid to look at other. I mean, this is a Master Splinter. Joe Cremelli designed this fly. You know, so you can tie it exactly his way or, you know, however you want. I've never been one to like tie it perfectly. I don't always, as Donna would say, I don't always follow the recipe when I cook, and that's the same way with my fly tying as well.
So one more quick question.
Sure.
Do you fish that on a loop knot or do you tie a clinch to it?
I usually, most of my larger stuff, when I fish at night, because I do tend to fish streamers and or I like the way a loop knot works on these because I'm tying a little bit stouter leader on there. So I'd say most of my nighttime fishing, I'm using 3X and or larger. So 3X is actually pretty stout for this region. So having a loop knot on there definitely allows this fly to move a little bit more. Does that kind of explain that? So it wouldn't be wrong if you know how to tie a clinch knot really good in the dark, and that's what you're used to tying, then tie a clinch knot on. Just be aware it may not move quite as freely. That being said, I don't think these fish, these fish are coming out to kill something that is not just like some little fly on the water. I mean, this is a chunk of meat. So they're going to be pretty aggressive. So that being said, it's not going to be wrong if you tie a really good clinch knot and that's what you like to tie. I would definitely though put it in your repertoire to try to learn how to tie a good loop knot, especially if you're fishing streamers in that. So yeah. So did that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, thank you, PJ.
Yep. And just so you guys know, I don't know if you saw this or not, I put this rabbit strip and I angled it off to the back side. This is going to allow me to start my palmering a little bit easier instead of on my side. So as you guys can see there, I've kind of got it, the strips hanging off the back side. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to wrap up. And I just threw in 2 half hitches. If you guys have a vise that can spin, you can certainly use your bobbin cradle, put it on there. But I like to tie as tight as I can. So I will pull this off. And again, don't be afraid to, let me tilt my, there we go. So I'm starting my palmer, and as you guys can see, it is coming right along, and I use my fingers. Don't be afraid to use a little bit of spit on there. And I try to pull back as much of the fibers as I can on this. And this would go for any product that you're trying to palmer on there, if it was a feather or whatnot. So this rabbit strip though is really convenient for that. And I put quite a bit of pressure. I don't know if you guys are seeing how much it's bending that hook, but it's quite a bit. And because this is all on leather, you're not gonna, hopefully you're not gonna break the rabbit strip. And then I'm up towards the eye. I gave myself a little room right there. So I'm putting in about 3 to 4 tight wraps. Then I'm going to pull everything back and I'm going to do a couple of turns right in. And I'm actually pushing back. And what that does is it helps lock in that chunk of leather there. And that's really key for some of this stuff, because that leather over time, you know, you're getting it wet and then it's drying out, and then you're getting it wet and it's drying out. So it'll actually over time start to shrink. So on a lot of these products that you're using like leather and stuff, you really need to lock it in between a thread dam, and that's thread on either side of where you tie in. Just wrapping over the top of it isn't going to get it done. You have to wrap on the front and the back of it to get it locked in there. So I'm going back maybe about a half an eye length to an eye length. It's not a exact. And then what I do is I just I pull. So if you guys can see there, did you see how I pulled the fibers that were wrapped all the way around? And I actually took the stuff on top and I'm actually pulling it down pretty tight. And then I'm just gonna pull it forward. There we go. So I did about three wraps on there. So I'm going to give it a pretty good tight. So I've got 3 on there, pull them pretty tight. I'm going to do 2 more just to make sure it's all good. And then I'm causing a loop in there and I'm pulling it back, and I'm just I'm going to stay in the same spot with my thread. So as you guys can see there, can you guys see there? There's just a little bit of the eye showing up on the top. All right, so I'm doing 3 wraps on there, somewhat loose, and then I'm going to pull once I kind of get everything right where I want it. And I'm just going to start pulling tight. I'm going to put 2 more wraps on there. That one's 3. Just put in a security one there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull up and go back in front. Put 3 more loops in there. Then I'm going to whip finish. So there's that. So I went ahead and I've got 2 whip finishes in there. I just cut it off. And then what I do is I just I'm putting my scissors in there and I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I'm just going to cut straight across. You could obviously make this a little bit longer if you want, but it's I basically make it about the same size as the head. And that's pretty much it. Then I just usually flip it over. You can use UV glue, whatever glue works for you. I do try to stay away from like the CA glues on the outside and that, but I just put kind of a drop of glue right in there. And I'm just using some Sally Hansen's. It's nice and clear, works pretty good. You can use head cement, whatever works for you. Just happened to be what was on the table that would work for me. Then I just, that's pretty much it. If you need to kind of puff it out, which probably shouldn't if you kind of had everything out, but you can just use a comb or dubbing brush and just kind of pull it out that way and just like that. So that's really kind of it. I mean, that's the fly right there. Kind of a nice bushy little little thing. Let me raise her up there. There you go. So yeah, nice and easy. Great little tie. You can crank these out, you know, if you pre-do a lot of your stuff, like this piece here, this is the cutoff, and I know I can get at least one more fly out of that in a 2/0 series, in that, and just cut it off. And that's pretty much it.
Say, PJ, your tail is not too long.
No, I don't make them super long just because they tend to get wrapped up. A trick for some of that, if you want them a little bit longer, is to use a hard piece of mono and just kind of tie it in and glue them on. That'll keep them out more. But honestly, I don't like them to get too long just because they tend to get foul hooked then. I mean, really, this part here, honestly, I think you could get away without putting a tail on at all. But again, you're trying to make a mouse pattern, so
Well, the tail's for the fisherman, not the fish.
yeah, usually same thing with eyes and all that stuff. Most of my poppers and all that, they don't have any eyes. I don't waste any time on that. A lot of that's just for the fishermen. If I sell them, I most definitely take the time to put eyes on and stuff. But you know, I do kind of like the tail on there. You know, maybe it adds a little bit if I stop it completely, if we're on different water. But you know, I mean, that's kind of it. Again, it's a nice, easy tie. I don't worry about having to break it off. You know, because it is so quick and easy to tie. And you can tie, you know, there's all kinds of colors. Like if you wanted to do a brown or a green type thing, it really doesn't matter if you're fishing at night. So, so yeah, any other questions on this or
Well, I
night
got
fishing or?
if you could do this for us, if you can adjust your camera in such a way, and if you can do it on the vise, show us your loop knot. Can you tie a loop knot on that hook?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Vise?
let me
See it?
yeah, let me
I got a question on your rabbit fur. Is that a crosscut rabbit strip or is that?
yeah, let me let's see here. So what I have, most of this stuff is in, like, you can get them at most fly shops. This is a natural that I have. This is from Tight Lines. This is a barred, so it's a barred rabbit, thin zonkered tan. Actually, this is a natural in here, but it's just a zonkered normal half skin rabbit. Most fly shops will have them. Again, they come in all kinds of colors. You can buy the smaller packets in that, but I tie so much with rabbit and that I buy the half skins because that's really the most economical way for them. It's not really, I don't think it's cross cut, just because of the way the hair, you could use cross cut. I don't think it would be that big a deal, but as you can see with this, it lays down real nice.
Yeah, I used a crosscut and it didn't work so good.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, honestly, I don't think the fish will really care, because if they did, you know, I think you could get away with it though, honestly. And if you just kind of push it back, it should be fine. So,
Okay, well,
again, you're just kind of playing around with it, and you're just trying to make it kind of stick out like that. You know,
just
it,
want
it
something
comes
bushy
out.
then, right? You just want something really.
Yeah, you
bushy?
just want something bushy. Again, I kind of look at this fly, and this is kind of like the down and dirty version of a Moorish mouse. A Moorish mouse, they actually tie clumps of deer hair in, or elk hair. And it's also a great pattern here. I actually tie a bunch of those. It's a little bit stiffer. It floats maybe a little bit higher because you've got so much deer hair in it. So that is kind of, you know, that's kind of that program, you know, like it floats a little bit higher. You know, you may notice that they want something a little bit higher in the water column, a little bit lower, etc. So to get back to you, Mark, let me find a piece of mono. Hopefully I've got some on the
And PJ, while you're looking for your line, have you tied two tails on, imitating like frog legs or anything?
again, this is a fly that I imagine you could do whatever you really wanted to. You know, I'm not gonna, you know, I've thought about it. Actually, if you tied this and then put a couple of legs on, that would be probably a fantastic like largemouth pattern. You know, you could even like I got done and I actually had some thin strips. And these are actually foam, and that foam would actually, you know, it's kind of a triangular style. I don't know how, you know, it's just the way I had the razor blade in there, so it's kind of triangular. But if you cut it thin enough, I mean, it'd actually make a tail just fine. So if you wanted to put two of them on either side, that would be fine. You know, they have green hair and all that, so you could actually make frog style. There'd be nothing wrong with that. You know, those STP frogs are pretty much the same kind of style in that. So so I found some mono up here. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this or not, but I will do my best to try to get this. I can kind of describe it as I'm going. And again, this is the knot that I normally use. It is, oh, I know it's got a name, but I've just called it the loop knot. And I know some people tie it just as
$4,000 question. Can you tie it in the dark?
I can do it fairly well, just because it's a very similar, it's pretty similar to a clinch knot. So, and I can tie a clinch knot pretty much in the dark. So I tie so many clinch knots during the season, it's not even funny. I have, if people that watch me when I guide them, they're like amazed that I can carry on a conversation, hardly look at the fly and tie a clinch right there. So, so here we go. We'll see how this works. To start off with, can you guys even see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, mono. So I'm going to start off. I'm just going to actually tie an overhand. So it starts with an overhand, just like so. Then I'm going to go ahead and put that through the eye, maybe. There we go. So then what I do is it's through the eye. I'm going to give it about 3 to 4 wraps. So this is similar to basically it's a clinch knot. All you're doing is changing the eye position. You're clinching it to itself. See if I can get 3 wraps in there. And I apologize for basically like putting my paws all over.
It's important you go
Yes.
through that eye on the same side. You don't go in through the back side. Otherwise, it gets all twisted up.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of put it through. And then can you guys see that loop that I formed there? That's the overhand. I'm just gonna pull it through. So the butt section is gonna go in there.
Here's a question, because I tie a lot of these myself. How do you set a tight loop? Do you pull on the tag or do you pull on the line?
So yeah. So some of these knots, if I pull on that tag, yeah, so it's kind of, I kind of pull on the tag and the knot. So I don't know if you guys saw that. It's cinched down right there.
That's a good
So,
size.
yeah, and that's a good size. I could actually get a little bit tighter, but that's kind of optimal right there. And I usually adjust that when I pull the tag through.
Okay.
And then I try to get it as close as I can without cinching it all the way. And this knot will, I mean, it stays there. It's not one of those that closes up. I know some guys use a Duncan loop.
Nope.
Anytime I feel that, if you have mono against mono, closing it up and sliding on it, that's how most of your line breaks. All the saltwater guys and all that, none of their knots should actually move. Movement of your line, that's what causes a break most of the time. That's why you get that curly cue when you break off when you're not. That's
Yeah.
because you didn't cinch it enough. And what it is the heat that's generated in there. Most people like it. Heat and mono not good together. That's why you don't want to keep like this stuff out in the sun or in your car for any length of time. I pretty much change my tippet out every year. Just because I go through it so quickly, but especially the smaller diameter stuff, anything past 3X, I usually that's a 1-year deal. I try to keep it in my pack out of the UV light and stuff like that, because it'll start to degrade and stuff. So the heat's what really gets to them. Now fluorocarbon's a little different. That's a whole different animal. That stuff hardly ever, it doesn't degrade at all. But it's its own worst enemy. When that stuff wraps around, certain knots work better on fluorocarbon. It'll actually cut into itself. That's why you need to test your knots.
DJ, have you noticed if you tie that knot correctly, the tag is at 90 degrees to the line?
Yeah, it should come out on the side. I don't know if you saw there, I cut this off, and I do leave a little bit of a tag on there. I really don't have to, but it's just a habit that I've gotten into. So I usually leave a tag. And that's my loop knot right there. I know it's got a name. There's like the Orvis knot and all that, but it's just
it's a non-slip loop knot.
Yeah, it's pretty much, that's it. It's a non-slip loop knot. I learned it.
Have you found that you tie that knot probably more frequently than you tie a clinch knot? I mean, just to impart some action, I'm finding I tie more than clinches.
Yeah, I definitely will use this knot quite a bit. I mean, most of my guiding in that is clinch knots, because I'm usually using like hopper dropper rigs and stuff like that. I have used this a lot on just dry flies. If you can get that loop in there with 5X tippet and like a hopper pattern, that makes that fly just dance just a little bit more on there. I can tie a clinch knot super fast though, so I tend to use a clinch most of the time. But anything, when I get into the bigger stuff, I use a loop knot more often than not. So this is my knot when I do smallmouth. I mean, for everything, this is the knot that I use for smallmouth. This is the knot I use for musky fishing. Because you can tie, the wire that I use is loop knot or is tieable wire. So, I mean, hands down, this is other than a clinch knot. This is the number 2 knot, and you should definitely have at least 2 knots that you can constantly tie efficiently and effectively all the time. And one should be like a clinch style knot, and the other one should be a loop knot.
So guys, this is like super important. So could you, PJ, could you tie that one more time for us? Could
Oh
you-
yeah. Yep, for
This-
sure.
This is a huge knot for you guys to learn. You need to keep this in your arsenal for sure.
Yeah, and here's the thing is like, don't be afraid to take out, like, we're all sitting at home right now tying flies and everything like that, and watching TV or watching movies or whatever you're doing. Don't be afraid to sit in front of your vise with a hook or whatever, a paper clip, whatever, and tie these knots so that you get proficient on them. That's the only way you get better. And really, a poorly tied knot, you could tie a poorly tied bimini knot, or you could tie a really good clinch knot. And the clinch knot's gonna, if you can tie that well, a really good knot is always going to be better than a poorly tied knot. Everybody talks about, oh, like the bimini is 100% and all that. Well, if you don't tie that knot correctly all the time, that knot is not going to be 100%. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if I don't tie this knot 100% all the time, it's not going to be a great knot. So I went ahead. I'll try to, let me get my light over here a little bit. Can you guys see there? Or did I kind of bleach it out there? There you go. So overhand knot. First thing to do, overhand knot. I go up. It doesn't matter if I go down through this way. I don't think it really is that critical. So you can go up or down. It just happens to work better for me going up through the eye. Make sure you have enough, you want to make sure you have enough material there, and I don't think I do. So the key to this is like, and then I usually hold on to that loop of the knot. So I don't know if you guys can see there. Can you guys see that little piece of loop right there? So I'm holding on to the knot, and then I'm going to wrap it the number of times.
So PJ, have you noticed that you change your number of wraps depending on the leader that you're using? Like, do
Oh,
you
yeah.
more for
Yeah.
5X than you do for like 3X?
Yeah. So 3X and down, you can almost get away. Like this one, I think I put about maybe 3 or 4 wraps. Because this is like 18-pound test. And you can get away with that. If you're using 5X or 4X, you're going to need to have, you need to have a minimum of 5. And I've actually found on like 5 and 6X, it actually works better with about, between 5 and 7 wraps. You don't want to get carried away. 7 is usually about the most I'll do. But sometimes it just, and I don't necessarily count the wraps. I just kind of mentally know how many times. I can look at it and go, I think that's going to be. Some guys get really fanatical on that, but definitely the smaller the diameter of your tippet, the more turns you need to do. And that's the same with a clinch knot, same with this loop knot, etc. So, and then I went ahead and I've got some spit on there for kind of lubrication. I'm going to pull that, and this one's going to be just a tad bit bigger. I ended up cinching and pulling right at the same time, but that's it right there. And then another thing is do not pop your, don't pop your knots. When you go to seat your knot, you should just do a solid pull. And you need to pull pretty tight, but and you should see them cinch together. You'll actually see the knot finally seat. When you are tying on really big material, like if you've done saltwater fishing or anything like that, when you're tying on 40 or 60 pound fluorocarbon, you can physically and visually see that knot finally seat. Like you will feel that knot finally give and cinch down on itself. And then when you get done, it should look correct. Can you guys see the, you can see that tag end kind of comes, it's pretty, it's at about a 90-degree angle right there. So don't be afraid. Same thing with tying. Like when you're tying, you're practicing. Same thing with sitting down at the vise or watching some TV. Tie some material on there. Don't be afraid to use a little bit of it. Use your last year's tippet and burn through some of it so that you can practice your knots and you make sure you're good. Just like casting. All of that stuff you really want to practice your craft, because here's the thing, this right here, this is what connects everything to a fish. So don't chintz on that. I see so many guys talk about, that stuff's so expensive. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're going to take old used tippet and all that's been sitting in your car that's probably pretty much baked out. You've had it for like 5 or 6 years, and you're going to go on a fishing trip. And I kid you not, you will catch the fish of a lifetime, but it's going to snap off because you're using old stuff. Like, if you don't fish a lot, just buy the little 30 millimeter or 30 meter spools and be done with it. Don't buy the guide spools. They're 100 meters long. I can hardly go through some of those myself. So don't think you're getting a better bargain by buying more. Like this stuff has a shelf life on it and it does go bad. Same thing with leaders. We all have them. I have I buy my leaders in bulk and I go through a lot of them, but I'll tell you what, I have some that I know are at least, and I do try to date them. A lot of manufacturers now are putting like born-on dates and stuff on them, which is kind of nice. But when you get your materials in, don't be afraid to put a date on there so that you know how old the stuff is. I can't always remember, and most of the packaging usually says how old it is. Like this one here, this is a spool. This is a Orvis Super Strong, and it's actually fluorocarbon. So, and it has a born-on date on it right down there, if you guys can see. So this stuff is 2010. So I still have it around. I have it sitting on the bench. I use it for messing around with. Again, it's fluorocarbon, so it still has its strength. But because I think over time, even that stuff degrades, I still have pulled it out of my bag and just buy new stuff. Don't be afraid. Same thing with hooks. Don't buy the cheapest hooks you can buy. If you're first trying something out, yeah, I can see using an Eagle Claw or whatever, and nothing against Eagle Claw, make great hooks, been around for a long time. But these Gamakatsu hooks are about the best out there. Like, don't be afraid to buy really good hooks. This is what hooks you up to a fish of a lifetime. So don't chintz out on that stuff. Don't try to, some of your materials you can buy them at Hobby Lobby, buy them on the cheap, foam, stuff like that. But some of the key things that you should not chintz on is the hardware part of it. Especially if you're going on a big trip. I have a friend that he just went to Belize for a trip of a lifetime. Cost him a lot of money and all that. And, he was buying the best hooks he could buy, tying up all these flies and all that. And just, he got all new material for this trip. When you're in that kind of thing, don't chintz out on that stuff.
Say, PJ, on fluorocarbon, what would
Yes.
you recommend for replacement time?
As far as time on that,
yeah, if you took care of it.
If you could probably, if it's in the small diameter stuff, I usually try to change all my stuff out every 2 years for sure. I do tend to go through it a lot faster than other people do. I do have some that's in the 60-pound test and bigger. And I still use that stuff every now and again. It's usually not in my it's usually not in something that I would use to tie on. I'll use it for fly tying stuff. Like I use some of that. I'll use this for you can use them for weed guards, stuff like that. So that's what I kind of, if you have some stuff that's left over, that type of thing. The small diameter is where you're really going to notice it. And I've definitely have found this out the harder way. I had some old tippet material, and next thing you know, I'm tying on, and every time I went to stitch down everything, the fly would break off. And I'm like, wow, that's really weird. And then I'm like, why is it doing that? And lo and behold, it was because that tippet was too old. Small diameter stuff, probably like a 5X. And yeah, it was just baked. It had been sitting around for too long. And, so luckily I was doing my own personal fishing. It wasn't for a client. If I would have done that with a client, I would have felt terrible. Because, I want them to catch fish. I don't want them to lose fish. So, and same thing with your own personal fishing. I mean, yeah, I have it a little lucky because I'm up here now full time. But if you're making a trip up here, you're investing time and money to come up here. Because some people are like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just the driftless and all that. Well, if you have to drive up here, it's not just the driftless. You're spending time doing that. So,
what's your opinion on the Clinch Knot versus the improved Clinch Knot?
I stopped using the improved Clinch Knot a long time ago. I just there's no improvement to it. And I've done a lot of my own personal testing on it. I found with fluorocarbon bit into itself on the improved clinch, and it would snap off constantly. And same thing with the with just regular monofilament nylon, same kind of deal. So I just do a Clinch Knot. I can tie it better. I actually think it seats better. If you put the proper amount of wraps in there, I personally believe it is a much better knot. Other people may disagree, and that's fine. Everybody has their opinion. So, but I've gone away from an improved clinch for a long time.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I started, doing some foam flies.
Yep.
And I found a paper cutter at the house, one of those with a lever.
Yeah. Yep.
And I started using that. It cuts the foam pretty good.
Nice. There. I can actually,
Yeah, I acquired that from my wife, and now it's mine.
oh, there you go. Yeah, I know they have little ones that they use for probably scrapbooking and that. And again, super easy to use. You know, if you can cut these nice and straight, it makes everything that much easier. I mean, you can cut them with scissors. There's no doubt about it. But if you make a nice clean cut, makes everything look just a little bit nicer. You want your flies to look nice. Usually though, the fish really don't care. I mean, it's like counting legs and stuff like that. The fish don't care. They really don't. But yeah, if you can make, you know, a little cutter like that or a razor blade, I've got a couple of things that I use for cutting like foam heads and that. And it's kind of like it's like a cutter with a razor blade setting in it. And it makes much more precision. You can make identical products time after time, which makes your tying that much better. It's kind of like setting up everything. You know, when I prep my tails and all that, all my tails are about the same length every time. And again, that makes your flies look that much better. You know, that's commercial tying kind of 101. You know, if you prep your materials and you prep your flies, that'll make them look the same time after time. If you try to do the same steps over and over again. So if you watch a lot of commercial tires, that's what they do. They'll, some guys actually will take their feathers, all of those saddle hackles and that, and they sit in front on their tying desk or in front of their TV, and they will gauge out each and every one of their feathers and tie them all together so that they know if they're tying size 18 Griffiths gnats, they grab their size 18 hackle, it's all done. That's where those whiting farms, they have their 100 packs. Those are actually super efficient. They've already graded them out for you, so they're ready to go. So yeah, any way that you can help improve your prep work and your tying, that makes it that much easier. Any other questions?
BJ, you used a white tail. Was that just because what you had?
Yeah, I pretty much this was actually like a natural color. And the hair, the leather on it is white. They didn't dye it and stuff like that.
So black tail,
black tail would be fine. I've used the green, you know, kind of like a chartreusey color. I usually, this is where I kind of start getting frugal is I bag up my little tail sections. So my little cutoffs from my other tying, and I keep them in a bag. And then what I do is I'll go through and I'll be like, oh, that's long enough for a tail. That'll work. You know, it's not long enough for another fly that I'm tying, but that'll be enough for a tail and stuff like that. So that's where I try to save my money instead of like trying to buy cheaper stuff. I just try to maybe be a little more frugal. Does it work all the time? No, but again, this is if you're investing in this sport, that's how I like to do things. So I know it seems kind of silly and all that, but sometimes maybe if I need a little bit of dubbing and I want it, I can pull this out, get the guard hairs. Some of this looks like, it makes good cheek material for different flies and that. So, but yeah, the tail, honestly, it doesn't really make a difference. You can use, like I use these. I think they look cool with that tuft of hair at the back of it. But I've also used ultra suede, cut thin little strips, etc. So anything else?
So
Don't be
PJ, when you're fishing that fly on a 5 weight or a 4 weight, how long of a leader? Do you shorten your leader considerably?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, if you guys have fished with me, my normal leader length is like a 7.5 foot 3X leader, and then I build off of that. So when I go out night fishing, I just pull out a 3X leader, and that's what I fish with this. 3X is actually pretty stout. If
Nine-
I'm getting length would be 7 feet.
Okay.
Or 7.5 feet. I think that's what most leaders, that's the shortest they really come. I don't build too many of my own. I have rebuilt them on the stream if need be, but yeah, I mean, you can get away with short leaders for this. Again, you're chucking this. This is basically like bass popping. So it's not like you have to worry about being leader shy or anything like that. You're fishing at night. You want it to actually kind of slap down, and I try to gauge out my casting distance so that I am hitting as close to the cover as possible. If that makes any sense. So if I'm casting in a small stream and I'm that section of stream, I'm like, and there's a tree or something there, a big giant hole, and it's 20 some feet away. I know that I've got 7.5 feet for my leader. The rest of that I cast. I can usually gauge it pretty well, because a lot of times you're casting, it's like at night when you're out in the Chicagoland area, you guys can see fairly well because there's so much light. Around here, it is usually absolute pitch black. I mean, it's dark. It's so dark that you can't even see your hand in front of your face. So you really want to gauge it out. That's where having a lamp comes in handy. That's where understanding, and there is usually enough, like if the moon's out and stuff like that, you can usually see enough. But I mean, it's a lot darker than, say, the Chicagoland area or urban area. I mean, it's when it's dark here, it's dark. So, and then I try to get as close to the cover that I'm trying to fish as I can. You will hook the bank sometimes. Don't be afraid to snap off. If you feel you can get over there and pull your fly out safely, that's fine. 3X, the nice thing about that, you could go down to 2X or up to 2X. The only problem is if you do snag into something, the heavier your leader is, the harder it is for stuff to break off. So I do try to make that kind of weak link. I have found myself a few times fishing, and then next thing you know, I'm doing some night fishing. I'll fish at dusk and that, and then it gets into night fishing. And then I'm wondering why my flies are always popping off. And then I remember, oh yeah, I tied on 5X because I was fishing blue-winged olives at the right at dusk. So sometimes I forget my own stuff, and I'll be like, why did that fish pop that off? I should have caught that thing. And then I remember, oh yeah, 5X usually not the best thing for a big giant fly like this. So yeah, so sometimes you goof up on your own stuff. So
You ever run straight mono instead of a tapered leader sometimes? If you're short or no?
Yeah, I'll run I mean, any of my smallmouth stuff, I pretty much run straight mono. So yeah, I mean, I've been caught out there with not having a leader, and I don't want to cut everything off, so I'll just pull off my leader and I'll take a length. I usually have enough to rebuild, so I'll use like a 2X, and I'll just build out a 4-foot leader with just straight 2X or something like that. A little bit more stout, but yeah, you can get away with that. It's not optimal for this because, but I mean, again, you're not going for no one's seeing you in the dark, so you're casting you know, as I always say, when it's really dark, your casting improves 100% because you can't see it. So no one knows, as long as it gets in the water, that's the key. As long as it gets in the water, the fish are in the water. So
When you're building a leader out or you're repairing a leader out, what is your guide knot preference for joining two pieces of mono together?
I go pretty simple. I just use a double surgeons. You know, that's pretty much what I use is a double surgeons, and I'll use that double surgeons for quite a big drop. It's not optimal, but I mean, there's been a few times I've looked at something and I'm like, oh, that looks absolutely horrendous. I mean, I've gone from basically 0x all the way down to probably a 3x in one drop. Clearly not how you should be doing it. But yeah, I just use a double surgeons. I do know how to tie like blood knots and barrel knots. I like a double surgeons. I tie it really well. I've heard that it actually can be stronger than a blood knot or a barrel knot. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that tying those knots on the stream, for some people, they just don't tie them right. There's some cool video we actually, I think when we were in last year, right in like that March, April time, we saw some really cool video where a guy basically took a toothpick and just spun it around 5 times and then took the ends, and that's how he made his barrel knot. And it was amazing. I mean, you couldn't ask for an easier way to tie a knot. So that's an option too. If you feel comfortable, your leader does stay straighter with that barrel knot though. I will tell you that, like a double surgeons is it'll have a slight bend down to it. It always tends to bend just a little bit down. And if you want that leader a lot straighter, learn to tie a really good barrel knot. So
Cool.
all right. Any other questions?
PJ, I have a question for you.
Sure.
How
Go.
do you actually fish that fly?
How do I actually fish this? So pretty much what I'm doing is I will get out to where I'm going to fish, hopefully before it gets too dark. So you want to kind of pre-prep your area. So I'll a lot of the areas that I fish, either I fished them before or I'll have fished them that day. And then what I'll do is I'll take a break and then I'll get back out there as we're getting to dusk. Then what I do is I tie these on using a good loop knot. I will check for certain areas. So I'm looking for deeper pools, undercut banks, places that are going to hold bigger fish. So deep holes. If there is brush in the water, like down trees, anything like that. And then what I try to do is slap this down into the water. And I do try to keep a fairly straight pull. You don't want it to have a big bend in it. So you want to kind of, if you're fishing all the way across, you want to cast straight and start pulling it. And then actually, if you're in current, you want to take your rod and go down current with it so that you're in a nice straight line. If you get too much of a bow, that's slack in your line, harder to do that. If you do get a hit, you want a strip set. You can kind of do a trout set. A lot of people do if they're trout fishing, but try to do a solid strip set because these fish are going to be a little bit bigger. They have a little bit bonier mouth. And it helps with that. If you pull up too high, what it does is it actually takes that hook point and starts pulling it out because you're going to pull it away. So you tend to pull it away from the fish. So if you keep pulling straight, if that fish happens to miss, you're still fishing, and that fish will come back for a second swipe. They kind of, a lot of musky guys, there's a lot of crossover from musky fishing to night fishing for brown trout. They act very similar. They will come back for fly that they hit, you know, kind of like musky. They'll keep coming back for it. Big fish have a tendency sometimes to stun a bait fish or an animal in the water. So if you happen to pull that fly out, don't cast it into the same spot exactly. Go downstream just a little bit, because sometimes that fish will turn and go, oh, I'm going to eat that. I've stunned it. Well, if it was stunned, it's not going to actually stay in the same spot it was. It's going to go down with the current. So you want to fish down the current if you get a hit like that. So does that explain that a little bit for you?
That sounds like a guide tip to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, it's kind of like people when they, for dry fly fishing, they always cast to where the fish rises. And most of the time that's not where the fish are. You're casting to their tail, not their
Now,
head.
tell us what it's like. I mean, and I'm sure there's times you go. Now, if I was to go, I would go when there was some moonlight, just because, you know, I'm a flatlander from the city. But you country boys, I mean, what's it like fishing blind? I mean, do you actually fish out there when it's like freaking dark?
This last year, I used to fish quite a bit at night. I'd come up, and this was back before I left my job. So I was doing a lot of guiding on weekends and that, and I'd come up and fish. So a lot of times I'd get up here and I'd fish for, 2-3 hours, and it'd be midnight or later. And then I'd get up, guide the next day. And then my clients would go on their merry way, and I'd go and fish for the evening and that. And yeah, it's dark. I will tell you that without a doubt. When it is pitch black, it can be it is not for everybody. If you have a hard time walking around in the daytime, I do not recommend night fishing. I've got a few clients that have asked, and I've basically told them it's not going to happen. They just, the amount of tripping and falling, and you have to be pretty aware of where your feet are going. So yeah, I mean, having the moonlight is definitely an advantage. And then knowing your surroundings, like, I don't know, I really key in on certain things so I can go back to a spot and I kind of know where everything is. I do try to keep to places that are not going to have super, super deep spots. Because
Can I
it
chime in
just,
for a minute?
yes.
So where PJ's kind of going here, I think what that thought was my thought. Sorry, everybody, this is Donna. If you want to go night fishing, you should go to fish that spot during the day. And night fishing doesn't mean you actually have to get in the water either. The very first time I night fished, I got taken along with PJ and a bunch of guys, and we went to a stream that I had never, ever been before. Somehow or other, I ended up totally by myself, and I thought it'd be, that I needed to get in the water because there was tall grass on the bank. And I got in, and I probably didn't move more than 3 feet because I was terrified and did not know the water at all. And pretty much from that point on said I would never night fish again. Then I met other women who are crazy and love to go night fishing. And so I have gone with them, and I've gone with PJ. So I would definitely recommend fish the spot where you think you might want to night fish and pick an open area. Camp Creek is not a secret to anybody. It's located outside of
Iola.
Iola. Beautiful open field. There are cows in it, but there's no tall grass, and you can just pick a spot that's right off the road, a couple of pools, and you can walk along the bank, and that's super easy. You don't have to get in the water. We have gone to a spot and it's very, very shallow, and we can walk to the spot that's great for fishing, and we get there right at dusk so you can see your way in, and we've got our headlamps and we know the way because we've been there enough that I am comfortable, and I've got somebody's hand to hold, and I've got my walking stick, and it's easy in and out. So, you know, my biggest advice is go fishing where you want to go fish at night, and find that spot where you can stay on the bank if you don't think you're going to be comfortable wading in the water, and really know the water that you're going to wade in if you want to get actually in the water. But so you can do some really effective night fishing by never getting in the water. And that's probably your safest bet. Go with somebody who has night fished before, and things like the headlamp. I think PJ also has some glow in the dark strike indicator that we've used in the past too. You know, and it's not going to be an 8-hour trip. You know, you're not going to be out there all night. It might be fishing for an hour or two, and just enjoying being outside and seeing the moon, and, you know, just having a good time that way.
So PJ, is a night fishing trip just, if you get one fish, you've hit a home run?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those that you're not really looking for quantity. It's more like quality. You have a chance of getting into, like, if you wanted to come up here and try to catch a 20-inch fish, night fishing is the time it's going to happen.
So
more than likely.
You're probably aware of this then. This would be Dan's story of his night fishing trip with his deer hair popper.
Yes.
And he got that one fish.
Yes, exactly. And
his whole day.
yes, absolutely. It's one of those things that I've gone out, I've fished excessively late into the evening. In fact, one time just a little side story here. I got up there and I started fishing, and next thing you know, I saw somebody down by my vehicle and they were shining a light into my truck. I'm like, what on earth is going on? And then next thing you know, I see them pull away, and then they're shining the entire field that I'm in. And I happened to be there, so I turned on my light. I'm like, what is going on here? And then I realized it was a police officer, and they were just making sure I was alive. And then I'm like, boy, that seems really weird. I can't imagine why I'm fine. And then I looked at my watch, and it was 3:00 in the morning. So then I'm like, okay, that explains it. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe clearly I was focused on fishing and not time management or anything like that. That being said, usually if you catch a few fish, that's your night. It's definitely, you can make it long. Some of these younger guys coming in, I've seen guys go out and they're out from 8:00 at night till probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and they catch big fish. That's where they're going to be. They tend to know the areas. They do a lot of walking. They know that area. Donna has been on some trips, and I get to hear about them. At times I'm happy they didn't get arrested. So, so you just need to know that if you catch one giant fish, that should be your night. Call it a good night, go back, have a couple cocktails, I do not recommend like going out and like drinking a sixer and then thinking you're going to be all right. Be very aware. Like, you know, this is not a, like Donna said, I would definitely fish with somebody. Like, don't fish alone, you know, especially if you're pretty new to this. Do not fish alone, especially night fishing. Like, that is not, yeah, it's not good. But, you know,
That is like one good fish like per hole.
yeah, I mean, if you got into a spot and you know that you've got about 5 good holes, you pre-fished it that afternoon or whatever and went back, you know, and that's something else that people kind of are like, oh, that's crazy. I mean, don't be afraid to fish water that you've already fished. You know, give it a few hours to rest, but you can fish up here. I fished 5 minutes after a guy left and I killed it. You know, I watched him pull about 3 fish out. I let that area rest for 15 minutes and I pulled, you know, I pulled more than he did, but it was the time frame. It was right at dusk. The flies were coming off. So don't be afraid to like go back to a spot that you've already fished. If that, you know, so you know where you're going. Kind of like what Donna said, like have your gear ready, know where you're going. You know, I usually, a lot of the spots that I'm hitting, I'm only going maybe about, I don't know, less than half a mile distance for most of my fishing. And some of it, I'm going to one specific hole or 2 specific holes. And I'm trying to pull out the largest fish in that hole. I will tell you most of the time when you get into that spot, that especially if it's dark, the biggest fish is probably going to be the first fish that hits. It's the predominant fish in there. It tends to have the best lie for everything. So if you get that big fish, most of the fish that would come after that are going to be smaller. That being said, it could totally be the opposite, but there could be 2 or 3 big pigs in some of those like bigger waters than that. But yeah, I mean, you know, I've gone out there, I've been to a few spots and I've caught 1 fish and I've called it a night. You know, I've been out for 15 minutes, caught a big fish and I called it a night. You know, I'm lucky enough to be up here now full time so I can do that. But I've also been out for several hours and caught 3 or 4, and that's a pretty good night. This last summer, right towards the end of the season, I got into a few spots and I know I'll be hitting them again. There were some that ended up breaking me off, and that was on 3X tippet. They were pretty big fish.
Wow.
Why did the big ones come out at night, PJ?
Yeah, usually, not always though. I mean, every once in a while during the day, you'll get them. If you've got a good overcast day, you know, I mean, Dan Fisher caught a 20 and it was an overcast day. We happened to be at the right place at the right time, undercut bank. It worked. I had another client.
These fish you'll never see during the day.
Right. Usually you will not see these fish during the day. Some of the theory to a lot of this is that those fish eat at night. So even if you see them, they're sitting on the bottom and they're absorbing, they're finishing their meal. Like it's kind of like after Thanksgiving. And you sit in front of the TV and you kind of go comatose because you've had like 5 plates of turkey and everything like that. You know, these fish at night, they'll eat a big meal and it takes them time to absorb that meal. Like they're so full that they just can't eat anymore and they lay at the bottom and they eat their meal that way. They absorb it into their body and that. So that's part of the reason why you don't see those fish during the day. They don't need to eat during the day because they eat at night. And they eat they eat big chunks of meat.
So
they,
other than mice, which I assume don't fall into the river very frequently.
oh, you might be surprised at that.
What else? What else can you use?
Oh, well, let me grab something over here. So, I'll just show you some of my, so I don't, is this going to bleach out here?
It doesn't have to be super close. You can be back.
Yep. All right. So this is a smallmouth pattern that I use. It's on a 1/0 or it's actually on a 1/0 ahi hook. So this is actually a saltwater style. So this is a big bait fish. So this is a streamer pattern. Can you guys see it there? There we go.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've used that up here. Most of the time I use these for smallmouth fishing, but I've used them here. So I'll use those. So fairly stout hook. That's on a that's like a 1/0 or a 2/0 hook. It's fairly stout. So there's that. The other thing that tends to frequent this water are this is a Sculpin. So this is a woolhead Sculpin. I learned this pattern from Royce Dam. So his were usually a lot darker. I just tend to make mine a little bit lighter. I think around here the Sculpins are a little bit lighter in color. But that's on that 2/0 Gamakatsu, similar hook. So this is a bottom. This is on the bottom. So you're dragging the bottom. So this is a huge fish for brown trout to eat. And I mean,
would you fish that on a sink tip?
You could use a sink tip around here though. The water is not really that deep. So just like maybe a slightly longer leader. They do have leaders that you could, I know Airflow makes some leaders that are like sinking leaders. And I even think Orvis makes some sinking leaders too.
Yes.
So you could get away with that. So,
is it weight or because it's wool, it's neutrally buoyant?
So the wool adds some weight to it, but there's also like 15 wraps of like 0.35 lead on there. So it's yeah, it's a lot of, it's got some weight to it. It'll sink.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll definitely sink. So I've got a lot of lead on there. This is definitely not as easy to tie as what we tied tonight. But yeah, I mean, they definitely go after something like that. That's a big meal right there. So that bait fish, so big streamer. And then, I don't have everything right here, but this is just a rubber leg. That's a slump buster with rubber legs. I like using rubber legs a lot for night fishing too. They actually feel those rubber legs in the water. Lateral line. I have fished a 2-fly rig. I've fished one with a rubber leg and one without. And most of my fish came on the rubber legged streamer. And I even changed positions. I had the rubber leg in the back, rubber leg in the front. Same style fly in either position, and they almost always took this fly before they take the other fly.
So you said they probably they couldn't see it, but they could feel it.
Right. They feel, that's why I'm fishing bigger patterns. They feel that in the water. Maybe when the light is out, they might be able to see it better. But yeah, I mean, and I also have a couple other that are similar to this. If you guys look on my Instagram or Facebook page or whatever, I've got some other stuff, and I tie a two tandem style fly. It's kind of, I think they call it a It's basically a big giant streamer. It's articulated, 2 hooks. It actually works pretty good. I don't see any of them here. So, but yeah, I'm not afraid to throw big stuff here in the Driftless. So many people think they're all like little baby fish, but that is not that's not the case. You can get away with 3 to 4 inch flies around here, no problem.